You've answered this question your whole life, and every time you gave away control, it didn't feel dangerous. It didn't sound threatening, but the moment it was asked, something inside you shifted and you didn't even notice it happening. Because what if I told you the question isn't innocent, it's a trap designed to measure your submission? You think it's just conversation, casual, normal. But look closer, there's always a pause before you respond. A microsecond where your brain searches for the right answer, not your answer, the acceptable one. And that's where it begins. Most people never catch this moment, but you're starting to. That slight tension in your chest, that instinct to explain yourself, to justify, to be understood. It feels natural, but it's not. It's trained. You weren't born responding like that. You were shaped into it, conditioned slowly, over years, to react on cue. And here's the part no one tells you. The person asking, they don't even need to be powerful. The question itself carries the power, because it puts you in a position where you feel like you owe something, an answer, a reason, a piece of yourself. And the second you give it, the frame is set. You've stepped into their structure without realizing there was ever a choice. Think about it. Why do you feel the need to respond immediately? Why does silence feel uncomfortable, almost dangerous? That's not chance. That's design. Most people rush to fill that silence, exposing more than they should. But you're about to see why that instinct is exactly what's being used against you. Notice this: every time you hesitate, they gain leverage over you. That pause isn't weakness by accident. It's conditioning doing its job. It started earlier than you think. A teacher asks you something in front of the class. You answer quickly. You get approval. You hesitate. You question, you challenge, and suddenly the room shifts. Most people learned this lesson without realizing it, but you lived it. Answer fast, be correct, be agreeable, get rewarded, delay, resist, or redirect, and you feel tension, judgment, subtle rejection. So your mind adapted quietly, automatically. You stopped thinking in terms of truth and started thinking in terms of acceptance, and that pattern didn't stay in school. It followed you everywhere. At home, when someone asks what you're doing, you explain. At work, when questioned, you justify. Even with strangers, you fill the silence, offer context, make yourself easier to understand. You think you're being polite, but you're actually being programmed. Because every time you comply instantly, you reinforce the loop. Question, right arrow, response, right arrow, approval, over and over, until it becomes reflex. And here's where it gets dangerous. The people asking don't even need bad intentions. Friends do it. Colleagues do it. Even people who like you do it. Not because they want control, but because the system rewards it. Most people are unconsciously playing the same game. But you're starting to see the rules. Watch closely next time. When someone asks you something simple, notice how your body reacts before your mind does. That subtle urge to answer quickly, to avoid awkwardness, to keep things smooth. That's not confidence. That's conditioning. And the moment you follow that urge without question, you step right back into the role you were trained to play. Predictable, readable, easy to manage. Because when your responses can be anticipated, you can be controlled without force. And the scariest part? You've been calling this behavior being normal your entire life. But what happens when you stop being predictable? Everything shifts, and not in the way you expect, because the question was never about information in the first place. The moment you answer normally, you've already lost the frame, not because your answer was wrong, but because you accepted the position the question put you in. Think about it. Why does a simple question make you feel like you need to explain yourself? Why does your mind start organizing reasons, justifications, details, before you've even decided if you want to respond? That's not curiosity being satisfied. That's control being established. This isn't conversation, it's silent hierarchy being established in real time. And most people step into the lower position without even realizing it, because the structure is invisible. The moment the question lands, it subtly places you on the defensive. You're no longer just existing, you're reacting. You're no longer observing, you're performing. And the person asking, they're now in the position of evaluating. Most people think dominance is loud, aggressive, obvious. But real control is quiet. It's structural. It happens before words even matter. Look at what happens internally. Your posture shifts. Your tone softens. Your brain searches for the right answer. You're trying to align yourself with their expectation, even if they never said it out loud. That's the trap. An invisible frame where one person asks, and the other adjusts. And once you adjust, even slightly, your value drops in that moment, not permanently, but enough to shift the balance, because you're signaling something without saying it, that their question holds authority over your response. Most people stay stuck in this loop forever, answering, adjusting, complying, but you're starting to see the mechanism behind it, and once you see it, something uncomfortable happens. You realize you've been stepping into this role automatically, over and over again, not because you had to, but because you were never shown there was another option. So now the real question isn't what they're asking you. It's why you feel the need to answer the way you always have. And the moment you question that instinct, something breaks, not outside, but inside the pattern itself. The second you stop playing your role, they don't know how to handle you, because the script they've relied on suddenly disappears. You don't answer right away. You don't rush to fill the silence. You just pause. And that pause, it does something powerful. Most people fear silence, but you start using it, because now the pressure doesn't sit on you anymore. It shifts back to them. They ask the question expecting a predictable reaction, a quick answer, a clean response, something they can process and move past. But instead, they get nothing, just your presence, your stillness, your control. Power isn't loud, it's the silence that makes them question themselves. Watch what happens in that moment. They start adjusting, repeating the question, clarifying it, sometimes even softening their tone. Why? Because the frame didn't lock in. You didn't step into the role they set for you. Most people don't realize this shift is even possible, but you're beginning to feel it. That subtle change where you're no longer reacting. You're choosing, and it doesn't require aggression. You're not challenging them. You're not resisting in an obvious way. You're simply not complying automatically. That's what unsettles them. Because unpredictability creates tension, and tension forces attention. Now they're watching you more closely, trying to read you, trying to understand why you didn't respond the way everyone else does. And in that moment, the roles start to reverse. You're no longer the one being evaluated. They are, because when you control your response, you control the direction of the interaction. But this is only the first shift, because once you realize you don't have to answer the way they expect, the real question becomes what happens when you turn it back on them. Because this is where it stops being passive and starts becoming strategic. Watch what happens when they're the ones forced to explain themselves, not aggressively, not confrontationally, just subtly. Precisely, you take their question, and instead of answering it directly, you redirect it. A slight shift, a calm, return. What made you ask that? Or even simpler, why? And suddenly, the dynamic flips. Most people aren't prepared for this moment, but you create it. Because now they're the ones pausing, searching, adjusting the same internal reaction you used to have. They're experiencing it in real time. The game changes the moment they feel what you used to feel. Now they have to justify. Now they have to explain. Now they're the ones stepping into the frame they tried to put you in. And here's the key. You're not doing this to attack them. You're doing it to remove yourself from automatic submission. Because once the question turns, the control turns with it. Look closely at their behavior. Their tone might soften. They might laugh it off. They might say, "Oh, nothing, just curious." That's not chance. That's pressure. You've interrupted the pattern. Most people would have answered instantly, but you didn't. And that forces them into unfamiliar territory, because now they're being observed, now they're being read, and you haven't raised your voice. You haven't challenged them directly. You've just shifted the direction. That's what real control looks like. It's not domination. It's not force. It's subtle redirection. That changes who holds the frame. And once you feel this shift even once, you realize how many interactions were never equal to begin with. How many times did you give answers without questioning the question itself? But now there's a difference. You're no longer just responding. You're deciding what deserves a response at all, and that decision? That's where your real power starts to take shape. And once you feel it, even once something irreversible happens, once you see it, you can't unsee it. The question doesn't sound the same anymore. It doesn't feel neutral. It doesn't feel automatic. You start noticing the pattern everywhere. In conversations that used to feel normal, you now see the structure behind them. Who's asking? Who's answering whose? Adjusting. Most people are still moving on instinct, but you're no longer operating at that level. Because now, when the question comes, you don't react, you observe. That split-second awareness changes everything. You're not pulled into the frame. You're looking at it from the outside. And that's the shift most people never reach. They'll still ask the question, but now you decide what it means. Sometimes you answer. Sometimes you pause. Sometimes you redirect. But it's always a choice, and that's the difference. Before, the interaction controlled you. Now, you control the interaction. Before, you were predictable. Now, you're deliberate. Before, you gave responses without thinking. Now, every response carries intention. And people feel that, even if they can't explain it, there's a subtle tension around you now. A quiet uncertainty, because you're no longer easy to read. Most people rely on patterns to feel and control, but you've stepped outside of those patterns. And when someone can't predict you, they can't position you, that's what makes this permanent. It's not a trick. It's not a technique you switch on and off. It's awareness that rewires how you move through every interaction. You don't just hear questions anymore. You see intentions behind them. And once you operate at that level, you're no longer someone who gets controlled by the game. You're the one who decides how it's played.